note this. According to the German booklet, 80 Years of Anti-Fascist Action by Bernd Langer, published by the Association for the Promotion of Anti-Fascist Culture, written by a guy who supports them, it seems. Now, notice this, that Langer is a former member of the ANTIFA, formerly one of Germany's largest Antifa organizations, which disbanded back in 2004. And I noted the idea of the United Front strategy was to bring together left-wing organizations, unite the front line, in order to incite communist revolution. Now, the Soviets, they believed that following Russia's revolution, 1917, this was just a few years after, 1917, they said communism would next spread to Germany because they believed that Germany had the second largest communist party, the KPD, that was the Communist Party of Germany, the advanced industrial country, and they believed it was going to spread there next. Now, it was at the Fourth World Congress of the Comintern, 1922, just a few years after the Bolshevik Revolution, that this whole plan on fomenting communism in Germany took place. Moscow formed the slogan, quote, "To the masses," for its United Front strategy, and it sought to join together the various communist and workers' parties of Germany under a single ideological banner that it controlled. And interestingly, they say this, quote, "The United Front thus did not mean an equal cooperation between different organizations, but the dominance of the workers' movement by the communists," Langer writes. Now, on that point, people say, well, what about fascism and Nazism? Let me explain. I wrote this. Benito Mussolini, a Marxist and socialist, in fact, one of the most popular socialists in all of Europe at the time. He had just been recently expelled from Italy's Socialist Party in 1914 because he supported, World War II, and he later founded what? He founded the fascist movement as his own political party. Mussolini took power through his March on Rome in October of 1922, this exact same time. In Germany, Adolf Hitler, he became the head of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The Nazis, right? The Nazi Party. That was in 1921. And he also mounted a coup attempt in 1923, also this exact same time around the Comintern. Now, the KPD, the Communist Party of Germany, decided to use the banner of anti-fascism to form a movement. Langer notes, though, the KPD, the ideas of fascism and anti-fascism were undifferentiated. They noted the term fascism actually served just as a rhetoric to serve and support their aggressive opposition. It notes as well that both communist and fascist systems were based on collectivism, state-planned economies. They weren't actually that much different. Both systems also proposed ideas where individualism was heavily controlled by a powerful state. You were not able to have individualism. And also, that idea is what led to the wide-scale atrocities and genocides under all of these systems. Notes as well that Germany's Domestic Intelligence Service, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, the BFV, notes this exact same point. Quote, "From the viewpoint of the left-wing extremists, a label of fascism was pushed by Antifa, and it is often says does not refer to actual fascism, but is merely a label assigned to capitalism. While leftist extremists claim to be fighting fascism while launching their attacks on other groups, the report states the term fascism has a double meaning under the extreme left ideology, indicating, quote, the fight against the capitalist system. They're not fighting fascism, they're fighting capitalism." Now look, on this point too, for the communists in Germany, according to Langer, anti-fascism merely meant anti-capitalism. And he also notes this, that the labels, they served as nothing more than a banner under their own political vocabulary. Now, a description of Antifa on the BFV website, Germany's intelligence agency, notes the organization still holds the same basic definition of capitalism being fascism. And they say this, quote, "They argue that the capitalist state produces fascism, or at least it tolerates it. Therefore, anti-fascism is directed not only against actual or supposed right-wing extremists, but also always against against a state and its representatives, in particular members of the security authorities like police or, ICE at this point or anything. It also notes that, according to Langer, historically, by labeling the anti-capitalist interests of the communist movement as anti-fascism, so if you're just anti-communist, they call you, again, a target of this.
Socialist Democratic Party of
He notes
Germany.
this, quote, according to this, the other parties opposed to the KPD were fascist, especially the SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Basically, the Social Democrats were labeled as fascists. And also, he notes that, under this whole thing where the communists labeled everything as fascism, and so anti-fascism was the violent solution against everything that was not communism, this was the tool they used under that fake label. Now, also, on October 23rd, 1923, the Politburo of the Communist Party of Russia, they held a secret meeting. And according to Langer, quote, all the important officials spoke out for an armed insurrection in Germany, a violent revolution, just like what they did in the Bolshevik Revolution a few years earlier. And under the banner of this, the United Front Action branded its armed anti-fascist wing under the name, quote, Anti-Fascisti Action, Anti-Fascist Action. That is Antifa. That is what it was. And from the Anti-Fascisti Action came out all the Antifa branches in all the other countries of the world. It was the armed wing of the Communist Party of Germany with the intent of inciting a violent revolution. That is where it comes from. Now, Langer notes from the beginning the KPD was a member of the Comintern, and within a few years it became a Stalinist party, both ideologically and logistically. He also states it even became financially dependent on Moscow headquarters. Leaders of the KPD, with Antifa as their on-the-ground movement for violence and intimidation of all rival political parties, they fell under the command of the Soviet apparatus. Many leaders of the KPD later became leaders of the Communist German Democratic Republic, including the infamous Ministry of State Security, the Stasi. And so all these anti-fascist activists, they became these special agents of the communist state once they actually took power. They became the Stasi. Now, Antifa on this point has always basically fomented chaos, violence. They've always worked as a terrorist organization. Their focus was to use violence as a tool to foment political change. And if your ideology is to use violence as a tool for political change, by definition, that is terrorism. That's what terrorism is. Not only that, but what Antifa currently does and always had is a clear structure and a system of organization. It is an organization just like any communist group. And an organization also just like any terrorist group where guys are plotting in caves and so on, right? Now, not only that, but the groups under Antifa, because there's many of them, some of them are not directly under the direct Antifa designation. Many of them are technically affiliates, offshoots, and just function off the ideology. They use the booklets, they use the trainings, they use those things. A key question for Donald Trump is going to be, how does his administration target the group as a terrorist group when not all of them use the direct name? They use all kinds of names. And, they can just change their name saying, well, we're not really Antifa. We're something like a gun club, or we're like, a group to arm the left or something like that. But we, use the Antifa ideology. The question is going to be, how do they go after that? So we'll see how they do it, the approach they have, when we actually see the official designation. Now, also, on the point of Antifa being accused of fomenting attacks on their political enemies, even news outlets and NGOs, they could face investigations. On this point, the Department of Homeland Security issued a release on September 17th, and DHS is calling on media and the far left to stop attacking Trump, his supporters, and law enforcement with DHS. This is the official release. They say this, quote, following the evil act of political violence witnessed in the country last week, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the resulting attempts to resist and so they resulted in severe injuries to ICE and law enforcement officers, one being dragged by a car, another hit by a car. DHS is calling on the media, leftist groups, and sanctuary politicians to end their demonization of DHS law enforcement. They say this hateful rhetoric is inspiring political violence in our country and assaults against our brave DHS law enforcement. And look, this call saying that you need to stop this is not ending there. It's likely the announcement from the Department of Homeland Security goes beyond just a request. Hey, please stop. It's likely this is going to be turning into something leading to actual criminal investigations, looking into whether news outlets, NGOs, or the people giving the money, the wealthy financiers, are doing this intentionally, whether they are fomenting attacks, whether they're creating social uprisings, whether they are starting basically a color revolution in the United States. Well, everyone, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.